You work longer, accept less, and still watch your money disappear before it can change your life. Each exhausted week is treated as evidence that you are progressing, while the results of your effort quietly accumulate in someone else's hands. The comfortable belief is that hard work is eventually rewarded. It sounds fair, and that is why it survives. It keeps you focused on producing more instead of asking who sets the price of your effort, who owns the process, and who profits when you remain dependent on the next payment. Machiavelli understood that power belongs to those who control the terms, not merely to those who obey them efficiently. He observed that people can be governed through expectations as effectively as through force. Give them a respectable story about diligence, attach survival to constant labor, and they will defend the arrangement that consumes them. Hard work is not wealth. Control is not wealth. Control is. That is the distinction the grind was designed to conceal. Being busy can make you feel necessary while leaving you replaceable. You can spend years perfecting a skill that increases another person's leverage, while your own leverage remains nearly unchanged. The harder you pull inside the same structure, the tighter its strings become. The mass is trained to admire exhaustion. You are here to examine ownership, access, bargaining power, and the direction money travels after your effort is spent. That already places you outside the obedient crowd, because most people protect the belief that has trapped them. If this feels uncomfortable, the discomfort is not a warning to retreat. It is evidence that the old explanation is losing its grip. The question is no longer whether you can work harder. It is whether your work is building freedom or merely making the cage more profitable for its owner. Begin with the first string, the belief that effort must come before examination. Strategy 1. Defend the source of your effort. Most people protect their paycheck by giving more hours, accepting more tasks, and becoming easier to depend on. The strategic few protect the part of themselves that creates income before the system can consume it. They ask what drains their attention, what produces no lasting advantage, and what work leaves them no stronger when the day ends. Picture the ordinary evening. A person opens a laptop after dinner, answers messages that could have waited, prepares for tomorrow, and calls the exhaustion commitment. The payment arrives, bills remove it, and the cycle begins again. The effort was real. The ownership was absent. Now picture a second person in the same evening. The same pressure appears, but instead of treating every message as a command, that person marks which requests affect the actual result and which merely preserve the appearance of urgency. 1 hour is recovered. The hour is not spent celebrating. It is used to improve a portable skill, document a repeatable process, or study the terms of a better opportunity. The difference looks small at night. Repeated for a year, it becomes a different position. Machiavelli observed that a ruler remains secure when people fear losing what little stability they possess. The modern version is quieter. The worker fears losing access to the next payment, so every demand becomes urgent and every boundary feels dangerous. The system does not need chains when dependence performs the same function. Most people ask, how can more work fit into this life? The strategic few ask, which word deserves a place in this life? Do not answer with a slogan. Watch the next request. Who benefits from the urgency? What would actually happen if it waited until morning? Which part of the demand requires judgment and which part only requires obedience? These questions are not laziness. They are the first act of self-defense against a structure that profits from confusion. Your first defense is an effort audit. For 7 days, notice what receives your time, what receives your focus, and what returns nothing except fatigue. Not every task deserves improvement. Some deserve removal. A busy life can be a well-organized surrender. Protect your effort before you try to multiply it. The discomfort may rise when a boundary makes someone else disappointed. Treat that discomfort as a growth signal, not proof that the boundary is wrong. A person trained to be available will experience selectivity as guilt before experiencing it, as guilt before experiencing it, as freedom And once the waste is visible, the next danger appears, working hard at a price someone else secretly controls. Strategy 2. Name the price of your usefulness. Most people measure their value by how tired they feel or how much praise follows a completed task. The strategic few measure the distance between the value they create and the portion they are permitted to keep. You can see this in a banal scene at the end of a workday. Two people complete similar responsibilities. One stays late to prove loyalty. The other studies what the work actually makes possible. Faster decisions, fewer errors, stronger relationships, smoother operations. One sells hours. The other learns to describe outcomes. The mass says, at least the work is honest. The strategic mind adds a colder question. Honest for whom? A person can be indispensable for a week and powerless for a decade. Skill without bargaining power becomes a service others can repeatedly purchase at a controlled rate. The problem is not that the skill has no value. The problem is that the owner of the process decides where that value is captured. Consider two assistants who notice the same recurring problem. The first solves it every morning and receives gratitude for being dependable. The second solves it once, records the steps, measures the time saved, and learns how the result affects the larger operation. When the next conversation about responsibility arrives, the first can point to endless effort. The second can point to a changed outcome. Both were useful. Only one made usefulness legible as leverage. Machiavelli understood that those who control the terms of exchange command more influence than those who merely perform within them. That does not require manipulation. It requires seeing the arrangement without the comforting story attached to it. Ask yourself what changes when the work is done. Does the process become more efficient while your position remains identical? Does your output create an asset, a reputation, a relationship, or a capability that travels with you? If not, the work may be feeding a machine that never records your contribution as ownership. Make the invisible transfer visible. If your speed increases but your authority does not, the gain may belong elsewhere. If your judgment improves but someone else retains every decision, the skill is being developed under another person's command. If your relationships expand but none can be carried into independent work, access has not yet become an advantage. This may sting. Good. The sting means the question has reached the protected belief. Do not numb that signal with another compliment. Discomfort can reveal the distance between the story of progress and the evidence of control. Growth often begins when praise stops being sufficient compensation. Your value is not the number of tasks completed, it is the leverage created after completion. Now the issue is no longer effort, it is the gap between what your effort produces and what your life retains. Strategy 3. Build a margin before you chase expansion. Most people increase income and immediately enlarge the life that consumes it. The strategic few create distance between what enters and what must leave. That distance is not luxury. It is breathing room. The ordinary scene is familiar. A payment arrives on Friday. Before the weekend ends, food, transport, subscriptions, repairs, and small rewards have divided it into fragments. Nothing looks reckless. No single purchase caused the problem. The structure did. Every dollar had already been assigned before it arrived. A second person receives the same kind of increase and makes no public announcement. The old obligations remain visible, but the new money is given a quieter task, reducing the number of decisions that must be accepted under pressure. Months later, a delay occurs. One person must agree immediately to whatever terms are offered. The other can pause, compare, and say no without turning refusal into a crisis. The mass believes freedom begins when income becomes impressive. The strategic few understand that freedom begins when income stops being completely clang. A margin buys time to refuse bad terms. It allows a person to withstand a delay, study a new direction, or leave an arrangement that has become predatory without announcing panic to the world. Without margin, every decision is made under pressure. Under pressure, the available choice is usually the one that preserves dependence. This is not a command to pursue a particular asset or financial product. It is a principle of control, Create a reserve of resources, attention and time that the system cannot instantly requisition. Keep some capacity unspoken. Keep some energy unpromised. Keep some money uncommitted. Machiavelli warned, in essence, that a ruler who relies entirely on another power's protection has surrendered his security already. The same applies to a life that relies entirely on the next payment. One person earns more and remains cornered. Another earns less but has room to choose. One is impressive, the other is free. Margin is the quiet place where bargaining power begins. Start with the least glamorous form of resistance. Leave a little room before upgrading the visible life. Delay the promise that turns temporary progress into a permanent obligation. Protect the ability to absorb ordinary bad luck without handing control to the first person who offers relief. What would change if one missed payment, one delayed opportunity, or one difficult month could no longer dictate every decision? The answer is not merely emotional. It changes the quality of every negotiation that follows. But margin only buys time. The next move is learning where that time must be directed. Strategy 4. Measure the ownership gap. Most people ask whether they are working hard enough. The strategic few calculate whether their effort is increasing personal control. This is the ownership gap rule. Compare the value your work creates with the control and lasting benefit that remain in your hands. A large gap means the output rises while your authority stays still. A narrow gap means the work is beginning to build something that cannot be taken at the end of the day. Consider two people starting with similar ability. Both work consistently for 10 years. One becomes known as reliable, accepts every urgent request, and receives modest increases while the process around them grows more profitable. The other becomes reliable too, but directs effort toward transferable capability, stronger terms, and work that can continue producing value beyond a single hour. 10 years later, one has a history of being useful. The other has options. The difference appears in small choices long before it appears in a title. One person asks for more responsibility because responsibility sounds like recognition. The other asks what authority, access, or lasting capability accompanies it. One accepts praise as evidence of progress. The other searches for proof that the position has changed. Most people call this difference luck because the alternative would require examining their daily choices. The strategic few call it direction. Use the rule on any commitment. What does this effort create? Who controls the result? What remains if the arrangement ends? If the answers are only experience and a reference, the gap may be wider than the praise suggests. This does not mean rejecting all employment or treating every exchange as a battle. It means refusing to confuse access with ownership, wages with wealth, or busyness with progress. A bridge can be useful without becoming your home. The ownership gap rule turns vague frustration into a visible pattern. Use it once when choosing work, then again when deciding what must change. Do not expect the measurement to feel flattering. Its purpose is not to protect the current identity. Its purpose is to show where effort is being converted into someone else's durable advantage. Once the pattern is visible, resentment becomes less useful than redirection. Work that increases another person's power while leaving yours untouched is not neutral, it is a transfer. Now that the transfer is visible, offense can begin. Strategy 5. Convert skill into leverage. Most people collect tasks. The strategic few collect advantages that make each future hour more effective. They do not merely become faster at serving the same structure. They learn to negotiate, distribute, document, simplify, and create outcomes that cannot be replaced by a generic effort. The mass says, become the hardest worker in the room. The strategic few ask, what makes this room dependent on a process, judgment, or result that can be carried into better terms? This is where many resist. The word leverage sounds cold, as if every relationship must become a transaction. That resistance often protects the old arrangement. Leverage is not exploiting another person's fear or desire. It is recognizing the triggers that could be used against you and refusing to be played by them. It is having enough alternatives that desperation no longer negotiates on your behalf. A person with one skill and one buyer must accept the buyer's weather. A person with several ways to create value, communicate it, and reach different opportunities can choose the climate. Imagine a technician who is always praised for rescuing a failing process. For years, the rescue remains personal. Every emergency calls the same number, and every emergency ends with the same temporary relief. Then the technician begins recording the causes, teaching others the diagnosis, and showing how prevention changes the cost of failure. The value is no longer trapped in heroic effort. It exists in judgment that can be explained, transferred, and negotiated. Machiavelli understood that a power base is safer when it does not rest on one fragile support. Apply that without cruelty. Build portable competence. Build a record of outcomes. Build relationships based on mutual usefulness, not flattery. Build the ability to leave before leaving becomes an emergency. That last ability matters more than it appears. A person who cannot leave must pretend to agree. A person who can leave can speak plainly without turning every conversation into a threat. This is self-defense against manipulation, not a license to manipulate others. Not louder, not busier. More difficult to corner. The workday should not only produce income, it should produce a stronger position for the next negotiation. Which advantage are you building that remains yours when the current gatekeeper changes the terms? If the answer is unclear, the next hour should not be spent polishing the appearance of progress. It should be spent creating an option, and every stronger position attracts a new threat, the temptation to display it before it is secure. Strategy 6. Conceal the developing advantage. Most people spend new income before it becomes power. They announce every improvement, upgrade every visible habit, and convert progress into proof for spectators. The strategic few let early gains remain quiet long enough to become durable. The ordinary scene is a small raise followed by a larger apartment, a new payment, and a social expectation that now feels impossible to reverse. The income increased, the dependence increased with it. Appearance consumed the very margin that could have changed the person's position. A different person receives the same raise and continues living plainly for a while. Not from shame, and not from fear of comfort, but because the new capacity is still fragile. The visible life changes later, after the change can survive a setback. By then, the improvement is no longer a costume. It is supported by a stronger base. The mass wants evidence that progress is happening. The strategic few want progress that survives being unseen. This is not shame toward comfort. Comfort can be useful. The danger is making every gain visible, expensive, and permanent before the gain has earned that burden. A public image can become another employer. It sends invoices in the form of expectations. Machiavelli observed that appearances influence judgment, but he also understood that a power without substance eventually becomes exposed. Let appearance serve reality, not replace it. Let the outside remain ordinary while the inside becomes harder to control. Protect your plans from casual opinions. Protect your reserves from casual promises. Protect your developing capability from people who only understand success after it becomes visible. There is a peculiar pressure to prove that private progress is real. The pressure says that an unannounced gain is almost no gain at all. Reject it. A tree does not become stronger by displaying its roots. A position does not become safer by inviting spectators to measure it. If this irritates the part of you that wants recognition, notice what that reveals. Applause is often the fee demanded by the old identity. The long game asks whether being admired today is worth remaining dependent tomorrow. Power grows fastest when it is not forced to perform. But secrecy alone does not create permanence. A protected advantage must become a system. Strategy 7. Turn effort into a machine that remembers. Most people restart their progress every morning. They rely on mood, urgency, and personal strain. The strategic few build routines, records, processes, and automatic decisions that preserve gains when motivation disappears. A person who must remember every bill, every promise, every task, and every boundary will eventually surrender to the loudest demand. A person who creates simple structures has made yesterday's discipline serve today's freedom. The mass says, when there is more time, the system can be built. The strategic few build a small system precisely because time is scarce. They remove repeated decisions. They document what works. They create checks against impulsive spending, reactive commitments, and the familiar promise to begin next week. This is not about technical complexity. It can be a written rule for accepting work, a scheduled review of where effort went, a protected block for developing portable capability, or a default that prevents every new income increase from becoming a new obligation. One person depends on willpower, the other depends on design. One is exhausted by maintenance, the other is quietly reinforced by it. Consider two people who both decide to develop a new capability. The first waits for an empty evening. When the evening arrives, fatigue chooses for them. The second places the work at a fixed time, keeps the materials ready, and records the next step before stopping. Neither feels inspired every day. One needs a new decision each time. The other only needs to obey a decision already made. Machiavelli understood that institutions outlast moods. In personal life, a principle becomes durable only when the calendar and the environment help enforce it. Ask which part of the future is still waiting for a stronger version of you to appear. Then give that responsibility a structure instead. Begin with one repeated failure. Do not build an elaborate monument around it. Remove one decision, create one record, protect one block of time, and make the preferred action easier than the familiar escape. A system is discipline that continues after emotion leaves the room. The final danger is subtler. Even a good system can preserve the wrong identity. Strategy 8. Become the person whose freedom no longer depends on permission. Most people define themselves by the role the system currently allows: employee, provider, specialist, reliable helper, exhausted survivor. The strategic few treat every role as temporary and build an identity around judgment, ownership, and choice. This is not a fantasy of escape from all work. Work remains necessary, useful, and honorable when it serves a chosen direction. The distinction is whether labor is the whole identity or one instrument held by it. A person can spend 10 years becoming excellent at obedience and then wonder why obedience is the only thing being rewarded. Another can spend those years becoming excellent at deciding where effort belongs, what terms are acceptable, and what must continue without constant supervision. Both worked. Only one was becoming difficult to govern. The mass waits for permission to feel secure. The strategic few create conditions that make permission less relevant. They are not untouchable because no one can harm them. They are harder to control because one threat cannot remove every option. Picture the moment a familiar arrangement ends. The first person loses not only a payment, but also a name, a routine, a social identity, and the belief that someone else's approval confirms value. The second person loses an arrangement, but not the judgment, capability, relationships, or margin built beyond it. The event may hurt both. It does not define both. That is the difference between possessing a role and being possessed by it. Machiavelli recognized that durable power rests not only on what a person possesses, but on what others cannot easily compel them to surrender. That is the final shift. From earning more inside the game to becoming someone the game cannot fully define. Do not ask whether the world will reward your effort. Ask what your effort is turning you into. Your labor should leave behind more than exhaustion. It should leave behind judgment, margin, leverage, protection, and a name that does not depend on one gatekeeper. The highest wage is not a larger payment. It is a life that can no longer be priced by someone else. This was only the visible edge of the map. Now the structure is in front of you, and the next move belongs to the person who can no longer pretend not to see it. Most people will hear these ideas, feel a brief disturbance, and return unchanged to the arrangement that keeps them useful and dependent. Pinned beneath this video is Virtue Power, the Machiavelli doctrine. It is not a lecture, not a motivational speech, and not another video, but the full doctrine behind this way of seeing power, 3 territories called gold, crown, and iron for money, the people around you, and the mind that rules both. Choose which territory to take first. Tap the pinned comment. Waiting, there are the rules. The powerful never say out loud, arranged as a code system for removing the strings before they tighten again. Subscribe to Machiavelli's gold frequency as an act of refusing the obedient pattern, not as passive agreement. The question is now severe and simple. Will you remain someone who spends a life proving usefulness to the system, or become someone whose effort builds permanence, choice, and a legacy that cannot be rented back to you?